One thing that has become synonymous in gaming has to be nostalgia. That's why we start to see things like remasters, remake, and reimaginings of classic games that we grew up playing because people want to be able to revisit these games. It's why we've seen the success of things like classic consoles, the NES Classic, the Super Nintendo Classic, even the PlayStation got a classic system along with the Neo Geo. And while the quality of those was a bit less than Nintendo's system, there was obviously still somewhat of a market for it because people want to play these classic games. We also see a whole upbringing of new retro companies making clone consoles, new controllers for systems. Hell, we're even getting new games for classic systems. So nostalgia is alive and well in video games, but when did nostalgia really start when it came to video games? At what point in time did we realize that we wanted to play these old games in a convenient manner? I think one of the first instances of nostalgia both being successful and lucrative for a company has to be with this, the classic NES limited edition Game Boy Advance SP. Now this was a really cool system, and it's a system that I've had for about over 10 years now. Alongside of this, they also released some classic NES games, 12 included, for this Game Boy Advance SP. So in today's video, that's what I want to talk about. I want to go over the NES edition Game Boy Advance SP, talk about the games within the library, and maybe you'll learn a thing or two. So sit back, relax, make sure you subscribe to the channel, let me get my scuffed gaming historian hat on, and let's jump into this.
Hey, RGT 85. Hey, Sean.
Oh my god, it's Stevie Richards! The classic NES limited edition Game Boy Advance SP was released in 2004 in North America. The purpose of this console was to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the release of the Famicom, which of course was the Japanese name for the NES system. While Japan got a Famicom variant Game Boy Advance system, the US received the classic NES limited edition instead, which of course makes sense. Looking at the system, it's clearly a beautiful looking system, dripped in classic NES styling. The top of the system features Nintendo branding in black and red color scheme. The shell of the platform is a light gray, with a dark gray segmented stripe mark down the side. Opening up the system is where things really stand out though. The D-pad is black along with red B and A buttons. There is a texture to the graphic design on the system as well, which makes it feel like a bit like an original NES controller. Start and select are done in red, while the majority of the design is black, except for another segmented gray stripe down the center. The screen used in this console is the AGS-001, which is the front-lit model of the Game Boy Advance, as the more desirable backlit AGS-101 didn't release until 2005. The bottom of the system is nothing special, with just the dark gray coloring. Along with the classic NES limited edition Game Boy Advance console, Nintendo also released 12 classic NES series games alongside of it. All of these games released in 2004 as well, with the suggested retail price of $20. It is said that the emulation used in these games is from the open source emulator Pocket NES. Let's take a brief look at the 12 games in the series. Bomberman was released on the system on June 2nd, 2004, featuring the classic original game in the series, but many noticed something very strange. The game didn't offer any multiplayer. It's a really strange omission, as the Game Boy Advance link cable was commonly used for multiplayer experiences on the system, but for whatever reason, this was omitted in this version of the game, making it not a very desirable title in the library. For some reason, my copy of Bomberman is also missing in my Move as well, so enjoy some gameplay footage. Castlevania was released on the system on October 25th, 2004, presumably to celebrate the Halloween season. Castlevania is considered to be one of the better games in the classic NES games library, as the emulation was spot on and was a great game to take on the go. Simon Belmont's first adventure is still often considered to be one of the best in the franchise. The arcade classic Donkey Kong released on June 2nd, 2004, but like Bomberman, there was a noticeable issue with this version of the game. For some reason, the cement factory level was removed from this version of the game. Along with that glaring issue, Donkey Kong was also a game that was a part of the Nintendo e-reader card system as well. So the $20 price point for this version of the game didn't go over too well with reviewers and would-be purchasers of it. Dr. Mario was released on the platform on October 25th, 2004 as well. A popular virus-clearing puzzle game that did see an original Game Boy release, the classic NES series version of the game obviously was a touch better, as it featured better audio and full-color graphics. Excitebike was released in the series on June 2nd, 2004 as well, and while no content was missing from the game like in Donkey Kong, this was yet another example of the game that was available via the e-reader for a much cheaper price point. Still, Excitebike's fun can't be denied, so many people were glad to pick up this iconic dirt bike racing game. Ice Climber was released on June 2nd, 2004 as well, and much like Excitebike was another game that was available on the Nintendo e-reader as well. Honestly, Ice Climber is a bit of a strange game to me, as I never really enjoyed it, but I do know that there is a large fan base for the game. Well, at least the characters that exist within the Smash Bros. Universe. Much like Bomberman, my copy of Ice Climber is missing in the move, so I gotta go find that. The Legend of Zelda was released on June 2nd, 2004, and for many is one of the must-own games in the classic NES games library. A faithful version of the game with nothing cut as seen in some other games released in the NES Classic series, this was the first time The Legend of Zelda was available portably, and was one of the more popular games in this collection. Metroid was released for the classic NES games library on October 25th, 2004. Once again, no content was cut from this version of the game, but some people felt that the $20 price point was a bit too high for this version of the game for one main reason. Metroid was a hidden unlockable in the Game Boy Advance game Metroid Zero Mission, which itself was a remake of the original Metroid title. Still, Metroid's appeal and timeless gameplay made it a must-own in my opinion, and Metroid was actually the first title I purchased in 2004 for this collection of games, this being my original copy from then. Pac-Man was released in the classic NES games library on June 2nd, 2004. While the NES version of Pac-Man is an admittedly solid version, the game had yet another hurdle to compete with. Pac-Man was already available on the Game Boy Advance in the Pac-Man collection. Not only was the Pac-Man collection the same price as this version of the game, $20, but it featured 4 different games, one of them being the superior arcade version of Pac-Man versus the NES version. Super Mario Bros. Released on June 2nd, 2004, and let's be honest, it's one of the games you automatically assimilate with the original NES, as for many, myself included, it was the first video game we had ever played. There are some minor graphical glitches due to the size and aspect ratio of the Game Boy Advance screen, such as Mario's mustache occasionally disappearing, but there is one unique feature that this version of Super Mario Bros. Has: link cable support. Instead of just passing over the handheld system to your friend in 2-player mode, using the link cable allows you to watch whoever is playing the game on your Game Boy Advance, and vice versa. It's not a huge deal admittedly, but it is a nice little addition, and since link cable support was supported in Super Mario Bros., it makes you wonder why it was omitted in Bomberman. Xevious was released on June 2nd, 2004 as well. While an accurate representation of this top-down shoot-'em-up, one strange addition was made to this version of the game. Instead of needing to tap the fire button for a rapid stream of bullets, you could simply hold down the fire button and it would auto-fire. Some complain that it took away a bit of the original challenge in the game, but to me, it's not a huge deal, as Xevious is pretty challenging to begin with. Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link was released on October 25th, 2004. Often considered to be the bastard child of the Zelda series, I always enjoyed Zelda 2, as the franchise didn't really have an identity quite yet, as this was just the second game in the series. The classic NES version of this game has everything intact, including the questionable lady you meet along the way, and much like the original Legend of Zelda, was the first time this game was available portably, making it yet another standout title in the library. Alright, so that is a look at the classic NES limited edition Game Boy Advance SP along with the 12 games available in the library. Like I said, I don't know what happened to my copy of Ice Climbers and Bomberman. There's a bunch of boxes that have random games in them back in my closet here, and I really don't feel like digging them out, so I actually just went ahead and repurchased them. Most of these games can be purchased in box for a very, small price. They're like 20 bucks on eBay, so honestly, paying that same retail price of when they came out originally for wasn't a huge deal to me because I wanted to have those back in my collection and I did not feel like digging through those boxes. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video and I hope you guys learned something. It's a topic that not really many people talk about on YouTube, so I thought it would be a fun video. Let me know what you thought of this video in the comments section down below, and as always, thank you for checking out this video. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, check out other videos on the channel, and as always, I will catch you guys on the next video. Later.